If you've ever done the math at 2 in the morning, how much you have, how much you'll need, how many years you have left to close the gap, this story is for you. There's a fear that doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't scream. It just sits quietly behind every birthday, every retirement account statement, every conversation about someone else's pension. It whispers, "What if you run out of time before you run out of need?" And it has nothing to do with the actual number in your account. Today, I want to tell you about an old clockmaker who spent 40 years building machines that measured time perfectly for everyone except himself. Near the end of his life, a young apprentice asked him a question he had been avoiding for decades. His answer was 7 words long. Those 7 words changed how the apprentice understood the rest of his own life. But we'll get to that. First, you need to understand who this old man was and why the question terrified him so much. Before we go further, tell me in the comments, what's the number in your head that you think would finally let you rest? The one that, if you reached it, you believe the fear would stop. You might be surprised how many people are carrying the exact same number, and how few of them have ever said it out loud. The town of Varon sat at the edge of a river valley, the kind of place where the seasons announced themselves in the color of the water. Tomas had lived there his entire life, in the same narrow house with the same narrow staircase, above the same workshop where his father had taught him to read the language of gears. By the time he was 61, his hands had built more clocks than he could count. Clocks for the town hall, for the church tower, for wealthy merchants who wanted something beautiful ticking in their parlors. People said Tomas could hear a clock's heartbeat the way a physician hears a patient's, could diagnose a failing mechanism just by holding it to his ear. But Tomas owned no clock of his own that told him anything he wanted to know. Every night, after the workshop closed, he sat at his desk with a ledger and did the arithmetic of fear. He added what he had saved. He subtracted what he thought he would need. He multiplied uncertain years by uncertain costs. And every night the numbers refused to agree with each other. Some nights the sum felt almost enough. Other nights it felt like nothing at all. A thin coin balanced on the edge of a table, ready to fall. His wife had passed years before, and his children had grown and moved to cities Tomas had never seen. He worked because working was the only thing that quieted the ledger in his mind, even for an hour. He told himself he would stop when he reached the number. He never let himself define exactly what the number was. It moved the way a horizon moves when you walk toward it. This is the part of the story you should hold on to, because it will matter later. Tomas was not poor. By any honest measure, he had enough to live modestly for the rest of his days. But he had never once, not in 40 years, allowed himself to feel that. The feeling of enough was a door he kept finding excuses not to open. The workshop itself told a story he never noticed telling. Along the walls hung clocks in every stage of repair, their faces frozen at whatever hour they had stopped believing in themselves. Tomas moved among them each morning with the calm authority of a man who understood exactly how each spring, each tooth of every gear was meant to behave. Customers trusted him instinctively. They watched him lift a broken mechanism to his ear the way a mother lifts a child's forehead to check for fever, and they left believing their time was in careful hands. None of them ever guessed that the man restoring their sense of order could not restore his own. One spring, a boy named Kieran came to apprentice under him. Kieran was 16, quick with his hands, endlessly curious about the small worlds hidden inside clock cases. He watched Tomas work with a kind of reverence, the way you watch someone who has mastered something you hope to master too. But he also watched him at night, hunched over that same ledger, the candle burning low, the old man's face carved into lines of worry that no craftsman's skill could smooth away. For 2 years, Kieran said nothing, but this is where everything began to change. One evening, after the shop had closed and the last customer had gone home, Kieran found the courage to ask the question that had been sitting in his chest for months. He didn't ask it gently. He asked it the way only the young can ask difficult things, directly, without the padding adults use to protect themselves. "Master Tomas," he said, "how much is enough?" Tomas looked up from the ledger, and for a moment something flickered across his face that Kieran didn't recognize. It wasn't anger, it was closer to being caught. "I don't know yet," Tomas said, and returned to the numbers. But what he didn't know was that this question would not leave him alone. It followed him into the workshop the next morning. It sat beside him while he calibrated a pendulum for the town hall's great clock, a job that required absolute stillness of hand and mind. His hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly over the delicate mechanism, and for the first time in his career, he made a mistake that cost him half a day's work to correct. Remember this detail. It matters later. The great clock of Verant had been running slightly fast for as long as anyone could remember, gaining perhaps a minute every week, so gradually that no one noticed until the seasons themselves seemed to arrive early. He began sleeping poorly, which for a man who had always taken pride in his discipline felt like its own small betrayal. He would lie in the dark listening to the town hall clock strike the hour, faintly fast as always, and think about how strange it was to have spent his life correcting other people's time while his own felt permanently unresolved. Weeks passed. Kieran's question kept resurfacing at strange moments, while Thomas ate his solitary dinner, while he lay awake listening to his own heartbeat, which had never once needed his permission to keep going. He began to notice something uncomfortable. He had spent his entire adult life perfecting instruments that told other people exactly how much time had passed, while refusing to build any instrument, any honest reckoning that could tell him how much was actually enough. And this is where everything changed. On a rainy afternoon in early autumn, an elderly woman came into the shop carrying a small clock that had belonged to her mother. It was cheap, poorly made, the kind of clock a craftsman like Thomas would normally have little interest in repairing. But she held it against her chest the way you hold something that matters more than its price would suggest. "It doesn't need to be perfect," she told him. "It just needs to keep going a little longer, long enough." Thomas took the clock into his hands. He turned it over, opened its worn back panel, and found inside a mechanism far simpler than anything he usually worked with. A handful of unremarkable parts doing an unremarkable job faithfully for decades. It had never been the finest clock in Verant. It had never needed to be. It had simply been enough for exactly what it was asked to do. Something in Thomas went very still. He fixed the woman's clock that same afternoon, refusing payment, though she insisted. When she left, he sat alone in the workshop for a long time, listening to the ordinary ticking of dozens of clocks around him, each one measuring the same passing hour in its own voice. That night, Kieran found him not bent over the ledger, but standing at the window, looking out at the darkening river. "Master," Kieran said quietly, "you never answered my question." Thomas turned to him. His face was calmer than Kieran had ever seen it, though something in his eyes looked almost raw, freshly uncovered. "I have an answer now," Thomas said. "Enough is not a number you reach. It is a decision you make." Kieran waited, sensing there was more. "For 40 years, Thomas continued, I measured everything except the one thing that mattered. I thought if I built the perfect ledger, the fear would stop. But the fear was never about the numbers. It was about never once deciding on purpose that I had enough to be at peace." He walked to his workbench and picked up a small tool, one he had used every day for decades, worn smooth by his own hand. "Do you know what I've realized?" he said. "Watching that old woman's clock keep perfect enough time with parts a child could understand. A life doesn't need to be flawless to be sufficient. It only needs to keep going, faithfully, for as long as it's asked to." Then he said the 7 words. He said them slowly, the way you say something you have finally allowed yourself to believe. "I have already had enough time." He didn't mean it as an ending. He meant it as a permission to stop measuring his worth in years remaining and start noticing the years he had already been given, fully, without apology. That old clockmaker is you, every time you calculate your remaining working years like a debt you have to repay before you're allowed to rest. He is you when you tell yourself that peace is waiting somewhere past a number you haven't reached yet, a number that keeps moving whenever you get close. The fear of never having enough for retirement rarely comes from the actual arithmetic of savings and years. If it did, it would resolve the moment the math worked out. But most people who reach the number they once swore would finally let them breathe do not feel relief. They feel the fear quietly relocate itself to a new number, further out. This is because the fear was never really about money. It was about attachment, the belief that safety is something you accumulate rather than something you decide. This is the one concept worth sitting with today. Sufficiency is not a threshold you cross. It is a stance you take deliberately, often before the external circumstances have fully caught up. The clockmaker did not become wealthier the night he answered Kieran's question. His savings did not change. What changed was his relationship to what he already had. He stopped asking his ledger to grant him permission to feel safe and started granting it to himself. This does not mean ignoring practical preparation. It means understanding that no number, however large, will ever feel like enough to a mind that has not first decided what enough means. Two people can have identical savings and live in entirely different emotional realities, one gripped by dread, the other quietly at peace, because the difference was never in the account. It was in the decision. So what do you do with this tonight in your own life, in your own uncertain numbers? First, take 5 minutes and write down honestly what you believe your number is, the amount or the milestone you think would finally let you exhale. Then ask yourself, without judgment, whether you truly believe reaching it would end the fear, or whether some part of you suspects the fear would simply find a new number to attach itself to. Just noticing this honestly is often the first crack in the wall. Second, choose one small area of your life right now, today, where you can practice the feeling of enough without waiting for permission from a spreadsheet. It might be deciding that the meal in front of you is enough without needing to already be planning the next one. It might be deciding that the hours you have today are enough to do something meaningful with, without needing to know how many hours remain. Practice sufficiency in something small before you ask yourself to feel it in something as large as an entire financial future. Third, tonight before you sleep, write down 3 things. Time and money together cannot buy you that you already possess right now, in this exact moment. The sound of someone's voice you love, a body that still carries you through your days, a mind capable of learning something new even now. These are not consolation prizes for not having more. They are evidence, real and present, that your life has already contained sufficiency, whether or not your ledger has caught up to that truth. None of these 3 steps will change what's in your savings account tomorrow morning. That was never their purpose. Their purpose is to interrupt the old pattern just long enough for a new one to take root. The pattern of treating peace as something you owe yourself only after the numbers behave, instead of something you are allowed to practice while the numbers are still uncertain, still moving, still doing whatever numbers do. Tomas did not wait for a perfect ledger before he changed. He simply stopped requiring one. Picture the old clockmaker's workshop at dusk, dozens of clocks around him, each one ticking its own small, faithful rhythm, none of them perfect, all of them enough for what they were built to do. Picture him no longer bent over the ledger each night, but standing at the window instead, watching the river carry the day away without needing to calculate how many more days remain. Tomas once told Kieran, near the end of his life, that the years he had spent afraid had not been wasted exactly. They had simply been spent believing peace was something that would arrive later, once the arithmetic finally cooperated. He wished only that he had discovered sooner that peace was available the whole time, waiting quietly behind a decision he kept postponing. And so, if there is one thing worth carrying with you tonight, it is this. Your years are not a debt you must earn the right to stop repaying. They are already yours. The question was never whether you have enough time. The question is whether you are willing to decide, today, that you do. If this story gave you even a single moment of quiet tonight, there are more waiting for you here. Next time, I'll tell you about a king who traded his crown for one night of real sleep, and what he asked for in return when he finally understood what he had been missing all along. Walk gently, hold loosely,